All right. Well, welcome back to Religion to Reality. We are here to talk about faith and tech. Our goal today in this webinar is to inspire and inform you so that you might connect with those you serve and others who also serve in ministry. We hope that you come away today with some key insights that allow you to improve the effectiveness of your ministry by relying on the data rather than just hunches. In particular, we're hoping to support you in building your ministry and helping those you serve lead an integrated life by decompartmentalizing their spiritual journey. In fact, that's why we called this Religion to Reality. Through all the webinars in this series, we're going to be interactively discussing what it means to live an integrated life, where we're not just obligated to go to church on Sundays, but we actually live our faith in each part of our life, internally and externally. This is what transforms religion from a responsibility or a social club into reality every part of our lives. And we'll get into more of this in a little bit. But first, I want to invite Father John to say a prayer for us and begin to lead us in prayer.
Great. So we pray in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And words from St. Francis de Sales. Do not look forward in fear to the changes and chances of this life. Rather, look to them with full confidence that as they arrive, God, to whom you belong, will in his love enable you to profit by them. He has guided you thus far in life, and he will lead you safely through all trials. And when you cannot stand it, God will carry you in his arms. Do not fear what may happen tomorrow. The same everlasting Father who cares for you today will take care of you then and every day. He will either shield you from suffering or will give you the unfailing strength to bear it. Be at peace, then, and put aside all anxious thoughts and imaginations. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, John. So, like I said, today is on technology and faith, embracing tech for spiritual growth. Here's our agenda for the day. So I'm going to introduce you to our two speakers today. I'm going to lead you through some insights that we gained on technology and app usage. Then we'll have a discussion. And then I'll lead you through some insights on desired Catholic app features, and we'll have a discussion about that. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. I'm hoping to allow a good 20 minutes or so for questions and answers. I'll clue you into the upcoming webinars in the series, and that's going to do it for us today. So as a reminder, this is being recorded. The deck will be available at religiontoreality.org, and I'll say that again at the end. You'll be able to download this and watch the recording anytime. But without further ado, let me get to the speakers. So today we are joined by Alessandro DiSanto and Juan Acosta. Thanks for being here, guys. Really great to have you. Alessandro is one of the co-founders at Hallow. Raised in a large Italian-American family, Alessandro is proud product of Catholic education from kindergarten through college, ultimately graduating summa cum laude from the University of Notre Dame with degrees in finance and economics. Alessandro began his career on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs in New York City before becoming a private equity investor in Chicago. After a series of life-changing experiences in prayer, Alessandro left his career in finance to join his friends in building Hallow, a Catholic prayer and meditation app. Alessandro serves as CFO and leads Hallow's efforts in supporting the institutional church, especially in the area of Catholic education. Alessandro is a founding member and venture partner at the 81 Collection, a Chicago-based venture capital fund focusing on providing capital to founders in industries often overlooked by traditional venture capital funds. He also advises early-stage technology startups on go-to-market and corporate strategy. Along with the other co-founders of Hallow, Alessandro was recognized as a member of the Forbes 30 Under 30 class of 2021 for consumer technology. Alessandro serves on the board of trustees of the Catholic Institute of Technology, the Department of Economics, Advisory Board at the University of Notre Dame, and is a fourth degree Knight of Columbus. He lives in Chicago with his wife and two sons. Alessandro, it's great to have you here.
Excited to be here. Sorry for the long bio. Next time I'll send the 100 one. Yeah.
Juan Acosta is the founder of Tabella Catholic app. After a successful career in product management and venture capital, he shifted his talents to fully helping the church. Juan is also co-founder of Catholic Angels, the first and only angel investment network that funds and supports Catholic entrepreneurs. Juan currently also serves on the board and is treasurer of the fundraising arm of the International Catholic Migration Commission, or ICMC. Prior to starting Tabella, Juan personally trained 700 entrepreneurs and business leaders as the chief operating officer of Draper University, a world-renowned accelerator. He also served as an investor in dozens of early-stage technology companies. He's been a featured judge on Sony's international startup show, Meet the Drapers. Juan was born in Venezuela to Venezuelan and Colombian parents. He currently lives between Miami and Austin and loves boxing as a hobby. So welcome, Juan. It's great to have you here.
Great to be with you guys here. Wow. We were just in Rome, which I guess people in the audience might not know, but Dave and Alessandro and I were just together a few days ago in person. So it's great to be here.
That's right. That's right. It's great to see you here again so soon. And maybe I'll bring that up a little bit later in the conversation too. I'm joined, of course, with my co-host, Father John Gribowicz, a high school instructor of theology and director of curriculum at Sunday to Sunday, and myself, Director of Product and Innovation at DeSales Media. If you want all of our bios, you can go check out the first webinar of the series. We've done enough with bios. I think it's time to get into it. So let us do that. But before we get into the data and insights, I want to ask a couple questions. So we're going to throw up a couple surveys here. These are anonymous, so please be honest. Nick, could we throw up that first survey, please? So the first question is, how often do you use Catholic, spiritual, religious, or faith-focused apps? The possible answers are every day, at least 3 days per week, once per week, rarely, or never. So go ahead and click your vote. I don't think this is too complicated of a question. If you're here, I think you know what we're talking about in terms of tech apps, faith tech apps. So Nick, if it looks like everyone's done, I think we can move on to the second question, which is, how often do you attend Mass? Again, this is not a confession. These are totally anonymous. So just please be honest. The point of this is to compare your answers to the data that we're going to be looking at in a little bit. So your options are every day, more than once per week, on Sundays, once or twice a month, rarely, or never. So as soon as I'll just give folks another moment to do that. And as soon as it looks like we're finished, I think we can move into the data. All right, here we go. Okay, can you guys see it looks like you can't see it. I'm trying to do it. Here we go. Just wanted this laser pointer to be able to take you around. I should say that the data on these slides is exactly the data from our reports. So I did not make them less complex in order to try to present or well or everything. I want you guys to have access to the raw stuff, especially since we're making these decks available. So I will guide you around as I talk. But so the first thing I want to say here is, and I guess maybe I should also preface this with, this is all based on a study that we did on discipleship around the U.S. of Catholics in America. This is data that we conducted in 2021. We released an overall report in 2022, and we are now releasing, this is brand new data that has never been seen before today and throughout this webinar series. And so if you want more context on that, again, I refer you to the first webinar, which you can find at religiontoreality.org. But I don't want to go too far into the context. I want to get into it. So here we go. What we found is that only 1 in 4 respondents introduced new technologies to others, and that another 1 in 4 don't discuss technology at all. And I think this is pretty much commensurate with the wider world in general when it comes to technology, because with only 3 questions, you essentially have almost a perfect bell curve here of 25, 49, and then 26. And that looks just like the innovation diffusion curve, which kind of predicts that there's always going to be a few people who are the innovators in any kind of given scenario, and then early adopters, and later on laggards. And so, you can kind of imagine if this was only 3 sections long, you would have this all to say, Catholics, Catholic disciples around the U.S. basically reflect the mainstream kind of technology adoption life cycle. So here we're comparing the sex, whether they're male or female, to different questions about tech items. And what we found was males are more likely to own a desktop, more likely to use navigation and business or finance apps every day, while females are more likely to use social media apps, more likely to lose track of time using apps, and more likely to be interested in all of the different things that we asked about when it came to the different features of Catholic apps. when we asked about, so what apps do you actually use regularly? So first of all, 71% said that they do use faith apps regularly. And when it came to which ones they used, we had, kind of an interesting breakdown. Podcasts and videos came in at 24%. The next top one was Laudate, 22%. I'm sure Alessandro would be happy to see Hallow here on the list here at 19%. Formed, iBreviary, Magnificat, and Word on Fire. So these are some of the apps that are on people's minds, and maybe they were on your minds too. Okay, so this was a key finding for us. We learned previously that people, how often these respondents were going to mass. This was a large sample, over 3,000 people. So we feel good about the statistical significance of all these stats. And we learned about the regular faith app use. What we compared now was the fact that we compared regular faith app use to how often people are praying, in terms of days per week. And what we found was those who use prayer apps more often, or faith apps in general more often, are 5% more likely to pray every day of the week compared to those who don't use faith tag apps. So it seems like something is working, at least in terms of the stickiness of making prayer a habit. And then we also learned that there's a correlation between mass attendance and faith app use. So those who are attending mass more than weekly are more likely to be using faith apps, and while those who are only attending weekly are less likely to be using, significantly less likely to be using faith apps. So that's kind of the first round of stats that I wanted to bring to bear to start. So I want to open it up for thoughts on this. Does this seem commensurate with what you guys have seen, in your work in Catholic app land? What do you think?
Yeah, well, the data does line up. I think for us, since Tabella is specifically a communications app within parishes, it naturally leans toward, well, if you found out about Tabella, it's because you are going to mass or you heard it from Father, after mass. And so for us, I'd say it's probably higher percentages when looking at it from this angle. But I do think, last time I looked at the data of people that are not, or that use our product, Tabella, and are not necessarily, didn't find it through their church that's active on our product. They just found it through media or social media. I'd probably say it leans closer to what you're describing here. But for us, it's a little bit skewed since most of the people find us when their church is active.
Right. And to be fair, that's exactly who we were polling too. In order to qualify for this study, they needed to say that they go to mass at least once a week. So yeah, similar. I think probably a similar audience.
Well, yeah, I think that last point is really interesting. I would say that by virtue of kind of the data and people we are most exposed to at Hallow, which includes a wide variety of those that are, let's say, very involved in their church or a faith experience versus those that are less so. We intentionally reach out to those that maybe are still searching, don't really know what they believe, non-Catholic Christians, and or people that are, engaging in a prayer life, but maybe not sacramental life. I think we see a much wider skew. And so I think it's important to contextualize this data in that kind of engaged Catholic category. I would say one thing that jumped out to me is a little bit, well, I think that the category of question deeply resonates, and then the numbers are a little bit surprising to me. The male-female skew. So I think one of the things that we see and kind of in our community of digital folks, and I'm sure Juan sees this as well, we tend to see a lot more consistent or like the right end of the curve engagement with female population, particularly in digital spiritual world. I think one of the places that showed up was in the slide. I don't know if you can reshare, Dave, but the social media.
Yeah, let me share that.
In daily apps, and then the navigation, business, finance stuff skewed male. I think men, at least in our experience, tend to have the faith in digital experience be a little more foreign to them, or maybe a little less natural than for women. So I think we tend to see women be more early adopters on the faith specific digital technology, which does show up here. So I would give voice to that.
What do you attribute that to, Alessandro? I'm curious.
That is, I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of things going on there, but some things to come to mind. And I think women tend to be more purchasers of spiritual things in general. So if you think about, like, sales of anything or even engagement in things. So I think women have a more natural desire set, I guess, to like be learning proactively. I think men require, or at least in our experience, a little bit more of an invitation and community. I think what we see when we think of things like Exodus 90, when you have that kind of fraternal environment, or even the Knights of Columbus, right, in the offline analog before that, I think the male experience of spirituality tends to be a little bit more communal and require that personal connection. Whereas I think women are a little bit, at least in today's Western American world, I don't know that's like a baseline gender difference, but able in a more individual, personal, devotional way, things like Blessed is She and other kind of devotional tools, that seems to seem more natural. So I attribute it more to a communal and personal invitation to men, even though there's a million other things going on as well.
Yeah. What have you found in your pastoral experience, Father John? Does that seem true to you too?
Yeah, I think I would agree with what's been said. I mean, it's always been, I guess you can just look in throughout the tradition of even the church. I mean, that there's just something about women who've been able to be far more nurturing of the faith life. And I always like to say it because faith is more about being so attentive to how God has already worked in your life. It's not so much about, leaping and putting yourself into something that you don't know anything about. It's about responding to what already is. And I've noticed just with women in general, they're far more attentive. So we could learn a lot, especially here as men, from that desire to be attentive. So I think that makes sense in this space too. I don't think that this is showing that simply that women just like to learn more things or need more things in their life to kind of interest them. I think it's just kind of tapping into that sense of being attentive and wanting to kind of deepen that attentive sense. That's just my immediate impression.
And what about this kind of validation that we're seeing that there is a correlation between prayer life and usage of faith apps? Did you expect that? I'm not sure if you're.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. I think I have to kind of think through it because, I have found personally, as you go deeper in a prayer life, you start to not lean on to, let's say, prayer helps to get you where you are desiring to go. That you're dropping in, so to speak, with less of an intro into it. And I've been working so much with my students this year specifically on going analog, and this is something I would love to talk about in this context here. Our school has a pretty strict no cell phone policy now, and it's been liberating for the students. You'd think like they'd be doing this kicking and screaming, but they really come alive when they're not attached to their phone. So the question I have too for both of you is just that, how much are we able to understand the role that technology plays as a means to something rather than an end in itself, and the danger when it becomes an end, because then it becomes like, I only do prayer if I'm on my app, so to speak, or I only do spiritual things if I'm connected to an app, because I'm sure both of you would think like that's probably not ideal. But how do you navigate through that? How are you maybe even coming to a place of saying that, I would love to see a person get into their prayer life to such an extent where they don't even need this app anymore because it's so naturally ingrained in their rhythm of being able to be so attentive. Use that word again. I love that word. So I don't know. I mean, I just like to kind of throw that out there because I've seen a lot of success when the students are able to kind of move away from their devices while still recognizing and honoring the great role that they do play in helping us get to certain places.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. So yeah, I mean, first and foremost, nobody needs an app to pray, right? So we sometimes get this question at Hallow specifically. Prayer happens in the silence of our own hearts in connection with Christ. And even more so than that, the pinnacle of anyone's prayer life is never going to be on Hallow. That happens at the altar, right? And so from a liturgical perspective, that is the source and summit. I think if we think about kind of in the vein of tools, it is also true that nobody needs a gym membership or a treadmill or a personal trainer to be physically fit, but it can often be helpful to have those things in order to either learn new things, have access to certain movements, to have accountability. I think one of the things that we see in our limited view of the world is that the technology can often be most helpful in terms of the accountability and the habit formation. I think a lot of people come into the experience of faith in a digital way that is like, I know I want to pray more, I know I want to go to confession more, I know that I should be doing these things, but I struggle to do it in the same way or a similar way that I know I should lose weight, but I struggle to actually do it. And so there, I think the technology is helpful in that kind of habit formation, the accountability. Some things that also jump to mind. I think one of the ways we try and do that is to try and be technology without technology. So we're very primarily audio focused. And so you pick what you're focused on, how long you want to spend, and then you kind of press play. Now we have everything from, let's say, the rosary, which is, road prayer, but still contemplative in a very deep way, but also learning things, daily exegesis, reflections on the daily gospel where you're learning. So I think in the same way that you wouldn't say, I hope someone gets to some level of prayer where they need to stop doing spiritual reading, right? Like so they can surpass needing the words of the saints, right? Like that wouldn't be a model that we would ever use. And similarly, books or technology, they'd be like, okay, I wanted them to let go of their books. I would say the point is, I think, an orientation in life that allows us to be able to open up, to go deep and deepen that relationship, whether it's an audiobook of He Leadeth Me, or they're listening to on Hallow, or they're reading a physical copy. I think the technology fits whatever the person's life is in the same way the Magnificat physically in your hands or digitally. So I think always outward towards relationship is something that we always have. And then ultimately, I think the mark of having a successful progress in your spiritual life is always going to be in deeper union with sacramental life. And so one of the things we see, for example, and I think showed up in the data here that Dave was showing, if you get to that point where you are praying on a daily basis, whether it's digitally or not, you're probably going to mass more, you're probably going to confession more. And so I think those are also hallmarks of a successful journey, regardless of the kind of technological means by which you arrive at that journey.
Yeah. One of the things, someone, I think Juan, you mentioned that we were all together in Rome recently, Juan, Alessandro, and I, and we were there for something called the Builders AI Forum, which was the first of its kind. And one of the conversations that was happening was around, kind of the use of modern technology, especially as it continues to exist alongside previous technologies. And particularly in the area of media, we see that all the time. Alessandro, you mentioned like books are where technology, just like these apps are, which is true. And I guess I wanted to ask the question, not to get too philosophical here, but just for a second, is there something fundamentally different about the technology of books compared to more recent tech? Is there something that's what have we gained? What have we lost as we move into this type of kind of environment for prayer?
I'm happy to give my answer on that. I would love to hear others. I think it is undeniable that the answer is they are different. I think one of the things we heard is that every technology has an embedded teleology of its creators, right? And so there is a certain, just the fundamental philosophies, anthropologies that people that build things necessarily impute into what they build that has necessary impacts on the realities of the people that use them. So it is absolutely true that reading in a book never means you're going to get a notification through the book that is going to distract you and bring you back to some other other distracting thing, right? And so having access to a smartphone in general opens you up to all of the addictive things I know we've talked about in other conversations. Jonathan Haidt's recent work, The Anxious Generation, which is really important, that there are really negative impacts from some of these technologies. I think that there's a great nonprofit called Humanality, which is kind of increasing focus on maybe moving towards dumb phones or intentionally dumbing down our access to kind of super addictive digital technology. We actually have a couple of partnerships with Humanality on helping people go through digital detoxes, right? Which is maybe something you wouldn't expect to be on a digital prayer app. But one of the languages that or phrases that we use kind of in that context is, it's not just about what you unplug from, but what you unplug into, or what you plug back into, right? And so, sloth used to mean sitting around and doing nothing, right? The noonday devil, if you go back to the early Desert Fathers writing about the sin of sloth. I think the definition of sloth, and I'm not a theologian here, but my understanding of the definition of sloth is indifference towards your obligations towards God. I think there's a reality that sloth in today's world is like being hyper connected and distracted to the point where you can't even engage with what God is calling you towards. So that I'm giving a bunch of random thoughts here, but I think it is absolutely true that there are more things to be careful of or aware of in terms of how we are being shaped by digital technology. I think at the same time, there can still be room for not all digital technologies are created equal. And I think prudence is the overriding virtue in kind of all things. And just like there are people facing new forms and higher levels of anxiety, stress, suicide attempts because of digital technology, there's also accessibility to mountains more informational tools. And so, it's a matter of constructing a world in prudence in search of virtue with whatever technology you have access to.
Yeah, I love to follow up on that, but I want to give space for Juan. Did you want to chime in with anything before?
Yeah, Father, you to your original question, the mission we set out in the company is to bring the world to the sacrament, and so we're very intentional with the roadmaps that we have. That if it doesn't fit that, which is to bring people to this incarnational reality of our faith, then potentially we don't build that. And so that's gotten us a lot of focus to the things Alessandro's saying. I'm totally with you there. You look at what the church, say a parish or a ministry group, they still live as part of this world. And if you look at the tools that they've adopted because they've had to adopt it, such as Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp messages, etc. They're filling a need by adopting these tools. And so at Tabella, one of the things that we've done is like, in a way, how do we compete to take time away from some of those tools, like, say Facebook or Instagram, where a parish might, say, hey, follow us on Facebook because that's where we post all of the things going on, or that's where we stay connected. But there's something a little weird there, which is, you're sending your parishioners to an ocean full of really bad stuff, if you really look at it. And so what would it look like to develop a tool that fit those same needs of what they're trying to do digitally, but in a space that's fully Catholic and can really bring people back to the sacraments? And so that's kind of how we've built the platform right now, around communications and around community. But there's definitely an area there where these big secular platforms, you're really competing against thousands and thousands of product managers whose sometimes sole job is to how do we grab your attention? And so the more we send people to those platforms, there's more danger there. And so our goal at Tabella has always been like, hey, if we can just develop with the same level of excellence, even though we have less resources, but the same level of excellence, and be able to put something useful and still innovative in many ways that fits the needs of the church that, say Facebook or Instagram would never build for the church. That's really where we're heading. And so I see several churches that we have of like, hey, they've completely gotten rid of saying we're on Facebook or on Instagram or some other tool, and they've really just adopted Tabella as their main safe Catholic space. And I think that's beneficial to the people using it.
Yeah, that's all very interesting. I'm a lot of things I've been thinking about in the context of this conversation and just in general is like I always like to look at everything essentially in the world as being a portal into a deeper reality of incarnational spiritual sacramentality. And like and like even when we say that our endpoint is to get people to the sacraments, it's really not the end point. Like that's really the beginning point, because it's not even so much a dependency on the sacrament in order to be able to experience God. It's that the sacrament then makes you experience the world differently. And I always think that maybe the one thing that ends up happening is that our portals of entry are not always as clean. So when Dave was talking about a book, well, it's in theory, a pretty clean portal of entry because it has a certain integrity to itself. It's a story from beginning to end, and it's going to get you to look at something differently because you had this experience of reading this particular story in this particular book. And the portal of entry through an app is simply that, a portal of entry. But it gets confusing when it's not clean enough to know exactly how am I going through the store and where am I going to. And of course, you're trying to be sensitive to everyone's needs and trying to like make sure you meet them where they are and everything like that. But like I always look at COVID as being like a real good test case of really where we are, let's just say, as a Catholic Church. When we were in that lockdown, the only responses that we were kind of getting was like, well, let's just Zoom masses everywhere or have, TV mass, or let's demand that the churches get open because we need the sacraments. And I was just sitting back there thinking to myself, that really shows that we're not doing a good job of helping people to understand that really the incarnation event is to help us to look at the world as being completely one with heaven, that the cosmos and heaven are really all the same reality, just interplaying with each other, and that you're going to have this profound encounter with God in anything that you do when you're able to see that God will show up in and through everything. And I'm always kind of curious as to what are we doing with any type of technology to help people not just get to church, but to help them get to that next level, because that's the most important level. I know, like with my students, I don't know, it's maybe 1,300 students, maybe 10% of them regularly go to church. But quite frankly, like I'm not at a place or a position to even like try to get them to go to church, because I don't think that's the next step for them. I think that they need to be able to be open to the fact that there is a certain type of awareness that God speaks to you in and through so many things happening in your life right now, and that the sacramental life will just be a cleaner port of entry for you to be able to experience that, let's just say 24/7, right? So like these are things I'm always trying to wrestle with, like how are we creating those portals of entry so that people don't stay at the portal or insist that they have to always go through that particular portal, but that they've been able to kind of go beyond that veil to now understanding that everything is participating in the very life of Christ. Everything is God. I just watched last night the new Bruce Springsteen documentary on Hulu, Road Diary, and I was like watching. I was like, this is a sacramental experience. I mean, hands down. I mean, God is all over this. It's impossible to not think that is not, in my estimation, the same type of intensity of having a very profound moment in liturgy. I mean, so, and I don't think there's anything heretical about that. In fact, I think that's good for us to be moving into a place where we can understand that God is constantly speaking to us and constantly showing that we are participating in something far greater and bigger than ourselves. I know it's a long-winded, but I just wanted to throw it out there because I was getting excited based on the things that we were saying.
Can I ask one question? I love everything you just said, Father John. And I know one of the things we struggle with, and kind of you're in the world but not of the world, right? In a certain sense, and right, I don't want to necessarily try and break apart the one reality kind of language that you were just using there. I'm curious, how you would think about Hulu is one portal that has a lot of stuff, not great stuff. You found a transcendent pseudo liturgical experience in Hulu. Do you ever wrestle with, like, is having that experience worth having Hulu or no Hulu?
No, I don't struggle with things like that. No.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Great. Perfect.
I mean, like, I can watch any movie at this point and be like, all right, I'm going to be open to seeing exactly where is Christ. If it's really bad, let's just say, then I'm somehow encountering more of the crucified Christ, right? So like nothing is at loss, So like I understand that, like, that's all contingent upon formation and where you are in life and things. I get that. Like, I'm not saying that, but like I want to be able to have complete freedom to go into any circumstance with any person who believes anything, and to realize, like, I'm going to reverence Christ in this moment. I'm not here to assess, like, where isn't Christ, but to know that Christ is here. And if I cannot encounter Christ, that's more on my end of not being open, or me playing into my insecurities, thinking that I need to have it so clearly defined as to really what is bona fide Catholic, so I can have that criteria in what I'm entering into.
I'm going to pause the conversation and take us back to the data for a minute. We had the audience do some polls, so this is a little bit step back in conversation in some ways, but I do kind of want to be able to share the results of the poll with the results from the survey that we did. So Nick, would you be able to pull up the results from the first poll, please? Thank you. So what we found, wow, this is kind of an interesting mix, very evenly distributed in terms of how often people use Faith app. So a third use it every day, but then pretty even mix across how often people are using it other than that. So kind of interesting to see. This is not as digital of an audience that I might have expected. Can we also pull up the second poll, please? Thank you. How often do you attend Mass? So this is also okay. So all right. So we've got basically a third of people are attending weekly. Another third are attending more than weekly. 18% are every day, and then not too many people are attending less often than that. So good to see. Looks like we have some faithful Catholics out there going to Mass, and that is nice. Okay, so the second kind of section of data is going to be on desired Catholic app features. Before we get into that, I want to ask one more question from through the polls. So Nick, if you would mind putting up number 3, thank you. This is, if a new Catholic Faith mobile app were to become available, which features would you find most helpful in your spiritual journey? And so you can choose all that apply on this one. And this could include upcoming Catholic events, a way to find masses, confessions, and adoration times, volunteer opportunities, finding ministries, small groups, faith communities, etc. A way to post prayer intentions, safe way to meet and connect with other Catholics online, and a tool to discover other parents near me interested in classical education models or Catholic homeschooling. So again, mirroring some of the questions that we answered, that we asked in our study, so that we can kind of compare, the audience that we have today with what we found out from the study. I also want to draw attention, as people are kind of finishing this poll, I want to draw attention to what some people have already discovered, which is the Q&A button below on the bottom of the Zoom interface. You can use that to ask questions. Like I said, we'll be getting into questions toward the end of our time today, but feel free to type them as they come up, and we'll address them as we go. So here is what we learned this time around. So now, again, I know there's a lot on the page. I'll try to guide you. So a Catholic app helps discover opportunities to participate in the faith that would be most helpful for respondents. So what we basically found was across the board, whether it's about Catholic events, way to find masses and so forth, volunteer opportunities, or finding ministries and small groups, almost everyone thought that it would be at least a little helpful, and many, at least, usually a third would find it, a third to a fifth would find it extremely helpful. That there's significant interest in an app that allows respondents to participate in spiritual direction. even if it's done digitally. So this was good to see. And in fact, you want to hear a lot more about spiritual direction, you can take a look at the last webinar we did, which was number 2 in the series on spiritual direction. So here's kind of the in-person response, and then here was the online response. And I will say, given how difficult it can be to find a spiritual director, this often is a good option for people to be able to connect with. Next up, while not as helpful as other features, a communication aspect would still be seen as helpful, especially a basic chat function. That's one of the things that people were really, kind of thinking that would be good for them. And then finally, a faith life organizer would be generally helpful for respondents, but there's not much interest in a way to track giving. So we asked about, if you had a way to centrally manage your giving across parishes and other charities, this was the least popular. This is actually one of the only unpopular things that we asked about. I was a little surprised, just because I thought personally this would be a helpful thing to be able to kind of manage that all in one place. But you know what? This is why we do market research. We can't rely on the hunches or think that everyone's like us. So before I move on to a discussion about this, let's throw up the answers to, I keep saying throw up. Nick, would you please pull up the responses to poll number 3? Here you go. Okay, so nearly everyone agreed that, so a good 3/4 agreed that upcoming events would be helpful to be able to find. Half felt that a reliable way to find masses, confessions, adoration times, etc., would be helpful. 60% said volunteer opportunities would be helpful. Half said that a way to discover fulfilling ministries and small groups, faith communities, and ecclesial movements would be helpful. 40-something% said that a way to post prayer intentions, safe way to meet Catholics, etc., would be good. The least popular one, just like it was in the study, was the parenting one, which in fact was so unpopular I didn't even put it in the slides here. You'll be able to find it in the appendix if you decide to download the deck. But I want to take us, Juan. What do you think about this? What do you think about these responses? Is this? I mean, it seems like this is the exact type of thing that Tabella was built to sort of try to meet. Is that right?
Yeah, and a little bit by accident. I guess not accident. As we started talking to churches at the very beginning, some of the needs of the churches kind of coincided with some of these needs from more of the parishioner side. And yeah, that's kind of how it resulted. I am wondering, David, if I could maybe ask you, before rolling out the survey of these particular features, like how'd you guys narrow down that these were the features that you would poll on? Was there a wider thing, or like how do these come about?
That's a good question. It was a mix of our own kind of thoughts about what people might find helpful, as well as the results of the qualitative portion of the study that was done before the quantitative portion, where we had interviews with Catholics and kind of, just we're able to talk through in these kind of longer form 30-45-minute conversations of like, what piques your interest as we talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely for the first two, when you talk about discovery, reliable way to find nearby upcoming masses, confession times, things going on in church, that's really where we started. We didn't really make it public to everybody yet, only for the churches. So if you go to this church constantly, you'll be able to find what's going on, events at that church. But now we're really turning the page a little bit and making discoverability be more accessible to everybody. So having data from the thousands of churches, even if they're not fully active, we have a method to do that now. And so we are moving more toward discoverability, so that, anyone that comes in, whether it's, a teenager that found us through social media or some viral video that we made and landed on the app, that not only do they have the content, but they can discover things near them. That is one of the big things that we found, and everybody always asks for it. Like when our app, and it's still very basic in many ways, but at the very, very beginning, we had a little bit of frustration because we were building for a church and, for a few parishes, but then we'd get a bunch of messages. Oh, what about my church? Or can I find things near us? And so it just took a little bit of time to get that. And we're turning in that direction quite a bit. Actually, 2 weeks ago, we released a new version where there's like a new search feature that your church nearby pops up. You'll see their confession times, their mass times, and if they're active with us, you'll start seeing all their events. So we are moving toward discoverability. And so it kind of lines up with all the data you're showing here.
Great, great. I think what might be nice to hear from both of you guys is what kind of, and actually this was asked as a question, and I'm curious if you guys have any kind of real life stories or experiences where people who have used, either Tabella or Hallow respectively, how they have impacted their lives. I'm sure you guys get kind of stories about this. Would you be able to share some?
Yeah, I'm sure Alessandro and his team have quite a lot. I follow them quite often on LinkedIn, and I see very inspirational stories. One that particularly touches my heart over at Tabella is, we focused a lot on the Hispanic demographic. Partly, I was born in Venezuela. I moved to the US when I was 9 years old. And so that it's part of the DNA of the company of, that's the culture I grew up in. And if you look at the data, I mean, in the United States, Hispanics really will be a massive portion. It's probably 45% to 50% in the next coming years of Catholics participating in, going to mass, et cetera. And so we started putting content in Spanish, even when the product didn't exist. We started just releasing things in Spanish. And there was a young lady that reached out to me personally and shared that during the pandemic, she had lost her mom, various complications, and that she wanted to, go back to praying in Spanish, how her mom taught her. And she was able to find, our content on social media, even when the product wasn't out. And that's how she came into the Tabella ecosystem. Years later, we ended up hiring her because she was just so passionate about the mission. And so she works with us in our community team. So that's just one story that's personally impacted me. We've heard tons of things, but that's one that, someone, when the product didn't exist, just the mission, and we released some things out there, somehow that touched someone's heart. And years later, that person ended up working with us for the mission and helping others. And so I thought that was really impactful over here at Tabella.
That's beautiful. Alessandro, I know you guys have tons of stories. Do you have a couple of favorites that you might want to share?
Yeah, I'll share maybe 3 different types of stories, and I'll make sure I'll keep it quick. I mean, we've literally had, we have dozens of people write in basically every day at this point. We've had thousands and thousands of people. If you're interested in learning more, it's amazing what people will write in an app store review. So if you just go to the app store and search Hallow, you'll see some crazy things. We have an entire customer quotes Slack channel. So I just kind of pulled up one for a recent one, and I'll share 2 of my favorites after that. But this one was just on an Instagram comment, which I think speaks to the power of kind of engaging with some of the social platforms and trying to sanctify places that can so often distract or destroy. But this one says, I'm not a Catholic, but a Christian. I don't know what it was, but I downloaded the app and fell in love, and a deeper love of all of God's works and grace. It's such a peaceful time I spend with Hallow. My favorite has been the study of the saints. There's so much to learn. Thank you. So I think particularly reaching out into the, from an evangelization perspective, the ability to just invite people into personal relationship with Christ and letting him evangelize them in the way that he wants to, I think is maybe one of the interesting learnings we've had. Earlier this year, I was at one of our partner high schools. We have a Hallow for Schools program. We're in 500 Catholic grade schools and high schools across the country. And there was this like 6'4" or 5" towering football player that came up to me in a deep voice and said, "Hey, you the app guy?" Because we were there recording some stories or whatever. And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I just want to say thanks. You helped me figure it out." And I said, "Figure what out?" He said, "Oh, the meaning of life." I said, "What? Can I get a little bit more?" He was like, "I'm going to stop doing the deep voice," but he was being recruited to play Division I football, had a ton of schoolwork to do, had a ton of pressure from sports, and he was just having a hard time sleeping at night. He was so stressed at night that he would end up scrolling until 2 or 3 a.m. on Instagram or TikTok or whatever the case was, and had really trouble turning off at night. So when we kind of launched with the school, he downloaded the app and started kind of doing these like Bible sleep stories, kind of closing your day with scripture. and different people read them, kind of some popular people. And he said, so he started doing that just because at this point he was willing to try anything, not that he was looking for God or anything. He said now he's going to bed at 10 or 11 o'clock. He's able to peacefully close his day. And he told me the story. And I said, by the way, like what did you find out? Like what is the purpose of life? Or like what is the meaning of it? He's like, I realize none of that matters. All I got to do is figure out what he wants me to do each day. And if I do that, he'll get me to wherever he needs me to go. So that I thought was really powerful, and speaks to people maybe you wouldn't expect, being able to find Christ digitally. The last one is a pretty deep and serious one. There was this young woman that reached out to us on our customer support chat and said, hey, I just want to say thanks for saving my life. And that was, shocking to hear. And so we reached out and said, hey, would you mind if we chatted? I'd love to hear more about your story. And she was now, I think, 18 or 19. When she was 14, she kind of lost her faith, in her own words, was a nihilistic atheist. By 15, going on 16, she was preparing to take her own life because she felt there was no purpose to life. And so she started a bubble bath, because in her own words, she described wanting her death to be a beautiful death. And so she got into the tub ready to take her own life. And she said, all right, God, this is your last chance. If you want me to know that you are real, this is your shot. So she opened up her phone. Her mom had made her download Hallow like a year before. It was the only thing she really knew to turn to for like anything religious. Had never used it before. Opened it up and just prayed whatever the next session was. We kind of recommended for you, kind of top of the first page. And it happened to be a reflection on the passion, Jesus being nailed to the cross, and reflecting on the fact that he went through that suffering and offered up his life so that we might have life in him. Broke down into tears, got up out of the tub, dedicated her life to serving Christ from that moment on. She's now a missionary, bringing Christ's world all over the world. And so it's just been really beautiful to see. Hallow didn't do any of that. Like all three of those stories have nothing to do with Hallow and are all about Christ saving love. And it's just fun to be able to bring that message to the world in a digital way.
Amen. That was beautiful.
Yeah, really, really powerful. Thank you all for that. I mean, that's very moving. It's so good to hear. Beautiful.
I think that our audience today is probably mostly made up of a lot of ministry leaders. And so what do you think are some good, kind of key ways that people today who are seeking to serve others in, through their, whether it's a parish or a diocese or a ministry that they are working through, how should they be thinking about leveraging technology to be able to do that better?
I think we live in a very technological world, and so there's tools upon tools that come out every single day. And for the people listening, I would really encourage, in the mission that they're in, right, of bringing people to Christ and serving people, that they maybe take a little bit more time for discernment of where the heart of these tools are, or with what heart they're being made with. If you look at a lot of social media, it's made to just get you into the next loop of content, and try to take you in a bunch of ways that perhaps will lead you away. And those tools might be good for evangelization and bringing new people in. At Tabella, and I'm sure at Hallow, we try to build things where our heart really is, where it's, we try to align it with what God is telling us to build. And we're really intentional with how we build a platform. And, we unlike a lot of secular apps where it's like, oh, how much time are they in the app, or how much attention do they have? We try to lean away from some of those things and really get them to other sorts of metrics. Like, can we get someone to, hey, they listened to something and now we know that they're going to mass. Maybe they were going once a year, and now they're going twice a year. And so, building with that intention. And so as a ministry leader, if you're looking for communications products or even prayer products, et cetera, just encourage you to really put a little bit more discernment as to how these products are built, and what's the end goal of those products, like where are they trying to take that user to, and just see if hopefully we can serve you on our side. Maybe there's different tools out there that could be better, but I don't think a lot of people put an emphasis on that, and so they'll just adopt. If some ministry leader is like, oh, this is the easiest thing, here, follow us on our Facebook group. I'll tell you an example. I've shown this screenshot quite a bit, but everyone's, lots of ministry groups are using Facebooks. But I went on a parish page one day just showing a demo, and you see, all their announcements, all the things that are going on in their church. But then on the right-hand side, you have these advertisements. One of them, and I have a screenshot of it, was literally Planned Parenthood. And that's not the church's fault, right? Like, that's just the Facebook's algorithm and populating things all over. And so, but I'd just be very careful with those tools. And yeah, to really just put a little bit more discernment into what tools you're using for what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just 2 cents. I think obviously everyone's position, everyone's situation is very different, and it'd be impossible to give any specific advice for all of that. I would say one mindset that might be, or framework that might be useful, is we always think of technology as in service of towards some specific goal. And we were at this conference that we've mentioned a few times, Juan, Dave, and I, this past week, and one of the things that I think was said towards the end of the week was, if you know your destination, the odds are much higher that you actually get there, right? And so I think when people go to the selection of tools or technologies or whatever, they often jump to features or look at all this cool stuff we're going to be able to do. But I think the very necessary and first question is like, what is our goal? And so knowing what, and that's that answer is the fruit of discernment. That's the only way you can get there. And ultimately, we're not in search of our own wills, but of Christ's will for us. And so we try and sit down and say, okay, like what are we being called to do? Right. For us, that's to help people pray. For you, that might be to engage with the fallen away people in your geographic region. That might be the young adults that are showing up to church because they're being made to, but they're going to stop as soon as they go to confirmation. For some, it might be young adults who are like really want to do something but don't know what to do. I think starting with a specific goal is always easier than a generic goal. And then it's in the definition, the defining, refining of goals, that whatever technology or tool, whether it's digital, analog, interpersonal, kind of falls out of that. But I would encourage you not to necessarily put the cart before the horse in front of that. And then I was going to say something else. But I forgot it, and I've already talked too much. So there you go. That's one piece is good enough.
That's great. Both of those are great pieces of advice. To close us out, I'm going to share my screen one more time and let you guys know about the fact that this was the third in a series of 6 webinars. So the following, so every other Monday, another one happens. So in 2 Mondays, we've got growth in faith, followed by community, followed by generational differences and discipleship. I encourage you to sign up for any and all of those at religiontoreality.org. Each one is a separate sign up, so we encourage you to do that. As I mentioned before, this webinar has been recorded, so you'll be able to catch that as soon as it's ready in a couple of days, as well as the slide deck to download if you like. Everything is there on religiontoreality.org. Thank you so much to Juan and to Alessandro for joining us today on Religion to Reality. Have a great one.